Thank you very much for inviting me to present to you legal aspects and regulatory aspects, in particular of space activities. Now, our conference chair this morning said that he was congratulated and praised by ChatGPT, that he asked the question, when will we be on Mars? Now, if you ask ChatGPT the question, what are the issues in regulation and space law? I guess ChatGPT will tell you, oh, you are a boring person. But I will try at least to provide you with some insight and some elements which are of relevance. Relevance for industry, but even more so relevance for governments and the public. So I would like to do that in 3 steps, international, national and European, and you will see it will be a growing relevance in view also of what action is taken right now and what perspectives are up on the horizon. Now, for international, I would like to point out, and I don't want to give you an academic lecture on that, but I would like to point out that we have an Outer Space Treaty of 1967, which seems to be very old, almost 60 years old, but, and this is something which you should always keep in mind, and I would be really glad if I could make you a little bit of an ambassador for the Outer Space Treaty and its still relevance, that this Outer Space Treaty is a treaty on principles, which of course does not regulate the nitty-gritty things, but it regulates the big things. The big things are, for example, the freedom of use of outer space, state responsibility and liability, due regard. This sounds a little bit abstract, but it just is the basis, for example, for Hungary to launch a satellite without asking anybody for permission to do that. And nobody can prevent that. Hungary can launch a astronaut without asking for permission to anybody. It's the freedom of use, and this has to be guaranteed and to be maintained. And if somebody tells you, oh, the Outer Space Treaty has to go away, it's not useful and applicable anymore because it's old, tell them, I'm an ambassador of the Outer Space Treaty and its principles because they are good. Good for every actor, in particular also for smaller actors. Now, this also means that there has to be further elaboration of the principles, and this is done in subsequent treaties, but also in other laws and regulations, and I will come to that when I talk about national space regulation. Here I just want to mention 3 areas which are currently under discussion on the global level. It's space sustainability, and my colleague Andrea Wehner introduced this area to you. It's space resources, which is far on the horizon, but nevertheless it's a contested political issue, and it's radio frequency spectrum allocation, where soon ITU will hold its next conference, and I'm sure activities and plans and projects also of Hungarian companies and the Hungarian government will be affected by these spectrum allocations. So very careful and taking care on the developments in this field. Last point, this is something which also affects any company in Europe, any company also in Hungary, in particular when you are export-oriented. And I know a lot of companies in Hungary are export-oriented. We are lacking, up to today, key principles for the global space economy. What is needed is that, in particular also, European companies have access to markets, that these markets are not captive, that we have fair and equitable opportunities to participate wherever there is an opportunity to compete in markets. And this is something where the governments and also the European Union has to take action and has to support the interests of the companies, of the commercial sector on the global scale. I move to national right away. National space legislation is something which is only slowly developing, even though it should be present and there already. Article 6 of the Outer Space Treaty says that governments have to authorize and continuously control and supervise the activities of non-governmental actors. So authorization is the core of any national space law. The states have the obligation, after they have signed the Outer Space Treaty, and Hungary has signed it as 120 other countries, so it's an obligation anyway. But now that there is more and more non-governmental space activities by universities which are not governmentally controlled, by industry, and by privates growingly. This means that if they are not authorized, it would be like on the street when cars drive there without a license, without an inspection, without also the driver having a driver license. So it's rather easy then to imagine what could happen if the governments cannot control the activities, but if they are liable, responsible and liable, unlimited liable. So it's a matter for the government also to maintain its interests and the interests of the public, which would eventually then pay for accidents or for misbehavior. And that means that any country where there is an activity of non-governmental entities in outer space actually has to pass such a legislation. Hungary is in the process, as I understand, of enacting, preparing such a law, and I think it can only be encouraged in doing so. You also have expertise at various universities, in particularly the University of Public Service, Ludovica, and you are also having the examples of other countries like Slovakia, which has been the last country in Europe enacting a national space law only a few months ago. So there is a need, there is the drive, and there is the necessity for your government to enact that, but it has, of course, to be done in a balanced way. The balance has to be done between, on the one hand, safeguarding the public interest, and on the other hand, not hindering, but even promoting the economic, commercial interests by framing or providing a regulatory framework which is good and beneficial for business to operate inside. The issue, however, is, and this is number 3 at the bottom, this, of course, has to be harmonized. Harmonized not only in Europe, but globally harmonized. Otherwise, you have advantages or disadvantages when you have a very strict national space legislation on the one hand, or where you have a rather lax or no national legislation authorization on the other hand. And this is something where our diplomats have to work on to harmonize that, to harmonize it on the European level and also to harmonize it on the global level, because what we don't want to have in outer space are flags of convenience as we have it on the high seas. Now, this leads me to the core, and I would also say the hottest topic in the field of law and regulation, and this is the preparation which is currently going on for a European Union Space Act. And this European Union Space Act has a basis in a number of activities and regulations. It starts with what is already there for 50 years through the ESA Convention, the system which provides all its member states with the opportunity to build up through the geographical return a continuous and focused way of establishing competences and capabilities. It is the basis of provisions in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. It rests also on EU Space Program regulation and numerous other EU regulations, plus on policies, plus on space economic diplomacy through ESA and the EU. Now, this EU Space Act in the making, and it is now under discussion, and nothing is settled yet. The opportunities are there for intervention. There is a public review, so anybody can also bring in views, expectations also, and critique. The idea of the Space Act is to have a single market, to create a single market for space activities with a focus on three elements: safety, resilience, and sustainability. It also has this interrelation with national space laws. And there a question which is also very relevant today for Hungary, and this is, shall we have our national space law before the EU Space Act enters into force, or shall we have it afterwards? Of course, this is a matter then of political influence. On the one hand, you will have, when you already establish a national space law, you will have a stronger negotiation position in the EU, where you can say, no, we cannot accept that because this is already in our space law. Italy did that because they enacted their national space legislation only a few months or few weeks ago. On the other hand, if you have your national space legislation now, and in 2 years the EU Space Act says something different, you have to change your national legislation. But this is something to be decided, assessed, weighted by your government, with the support also of industry and in consultancy within industry, where you then shape a way which is tailor-made for your country. It also, and this is something which you have certainly heard or where you are even concerned about, it will put administrative burden on any actor, in particular industry, for the authorization and the licensing and the standardization. This is also a matter then of negotiation. Where is the balance? I already said that operating in a set and reliable legal framework is a benefit of its own. Of course, this comes with some burden, regulatory burden. So the matter is how to balance that in order not to be switching to one side only and overwhelmingly. And then there is another point. It will have, the Space Act will have effect on non-EU actors. And this means where there is international cooperation, where there is also foreign investment from outside Europe, in companies in Europe, this might be affected. It's not clear how, it's not clear how strong, but be aware that this might be something which will affect the normal activities. We will also have a new approach to standardization, and it will the EU Space Act be an opportunity to strengthen what we already are preparing or undertaking on the international level, and this is the European lead in space debris mitigation in ESA and the space traffic management outline, which is undertaken by the European Union. That ends my presentation. I hope I made it relevant and interesting and not too abstract for you. And when you now ask ChatGPT for advice on space law and regulation, you, I hope, can do that with a little bit more confidence. Thank you.